Welcome back. In this lesson, we are going to learn about MySQL architecture. It is not complicated and has only 4 layers. Before I explain, I just want to give full credit for this diagram, for this picture that I copied from dev.mysql.com. So very simple and straightforward architecture. For now, just pay attention to the first and the fourth layer, the outer and the most inner layer. Any application, any tool, any external utility that want to interact with MySQL is called the client layer or the end user layer. This could be a script that you want to execute on MySQL server. Almost all programming languages like C, C++, Python, PHP, they have a software program called connector. In this case, MySQL connector, through which they authenticated, they interact with the MySQL and send their queries and perform database operations based on their authorization privileges. So this is layer 1. Any data changes in the database, regardless it is coming from a language or tool, is ultimately saved permanently in the database data files, and that is this layer, the fourth layer, the physical storage. Now this layer, this storage could be a local SATA SAS SSD drive, or it could be a attached SAN storage coming from a storage controller. So now let's spend a few moments on the second layer. This is the main MySQL server daemon process, the MySQL D. It interacts with the clients and delegate it to a different spawned programs based on if it is a store procedure, function, data definition, DML, etc. All these worker processes, they parse the query, find any syntax error, and see if this query was already present in a portion of the memory called cache, and find an optimal way to retrieve the result quickly, etc. Once this has been taken care, it is given to the storage engine, this storage engine. This storage engine, the MySQL brain, it has a different storage engines. The RDBMS, it's called also the RDBMS, the Relational Database Management System, which is responsible how data should be stored in the physical layer. What information should go to the undo table space, which index should be used, where are the data files, index files, log files are located, how to keep a copy of the changed data for the recovery point of view. This is the layer that interact with the physical data layer, this physical layer. We can just put data, we just cannot put actually any data, any file in the fourth layer and it will become a part of the database. No, it has to come through the storage engines, and there are different storage engines. We have a separate lesson to discuss those. By default, this InnoDB is the default storage engine. In the older versions, MyISAM or MyASM used to be a default storage engine. So that's an overall picture of how MySQL architecture look like, how different components interact and works together. Nothing too difficult, and it doesn't have to be. So let's get to it. Welcome back. In this lesson, I want you to learn where MySQL stores its files when we install it. Every DBA must have the knowledge of these files and their default location. For now, we will only talk about the types of these files, and in the upcoming lessons, we will discuss each type of these files in greater details with the demos, of course. So the first location is the location of the main MySQL database directory, also known as data dir. The default location is var lib MySQL. And this location, this directory is actually a home directory for an operating system user called MySQL. And this user is actually created when we install MySQL. So if we delete this user with a -r option, the whole database directory is gone. Also, any database, new database that we create in the system, it will appear in this directory as a folder name. So if I create a database name employees, in this file structure, there will be a folder called employees. The next file location and the file I want you to memorize this is a var log MySQL d.log. MySQL d.log is the main log file for MySQL, and it is a very critical file. Every DBA, whenever they are asked to troubleshoot a MySQL server, the first thing they do, they go in this file and search for any error warnings or infos. This file also contain the initial root password whenever we install a new MySQL server, and then later on we use MySQL secure installation to change this password. The third type of file that I want you to remember is a global configuration file. It's also called my.conf or my.cnf. The default location is under etc. So you know any file under etc. actually it requires to have a sudo privileges. So the default location for my.conf file is under etc. and it contains the configuration settings that will be loaded when the MySQL server starts, and it will affect how MySQL will start. Where are the locations of all the files? So for now, I will show you the demo exactly where these files are, and then we will go from there. Is the configuration, the global configuration file, etc, or any file that has CNF extension. So as you can see, this file, since it is under etc, it is owned by root. So only root can change this. All the settings of the configuration of the server, it is actually in this file. Very critical file. It actually describes how MySQL server should behave, how MySQL server should run. And we will have a detailed conversation, detail with the demos, each and every setting that we will change in there. So for now, we will stop here. I will see you in the next lesson. Welcome back. So in the previous lesson, we learned about where MySQL store its different files. In this lesson, I would like to point out the location for different executable programs that also get installed when we install MySQL server. All these programs are executable and they all start with the word MySQL in them. Any normal user can execute these programs as long as that user has MySQL permissions to do so. Under Linux systems, these programs are located under /user/bin. So let me show you. So I have logged in to the database host. So let me go to ls user bin. And since all these programs start with MySQL, so let me type MySQL star. So these are all the programs that were installed when MySQL was installed here. I have a separate lesson which will go through each and every of these programs, what this program does, how we can utilize them. So for now, since we are only exploring the MySQL server, so for now, that should be enough for us to know that beside MySQL different data files, log files, error files, we also have some programs that pre-installed and we are able to use them whenever we can. So for now, this is enough and I will see you in the next lesson. Welcome back. So in this lesson, we will see how MySQL service is controlled by systemd. MySQL server used to start with a program called MySQLd_safe, but since the release of 8.0.16, systemd takes care of managing the MySQL server service. Systemd provides a utility called systemctl or system control that we can use to start, stop, enable, and disable the MySQL service. So let's see that service. Sudo systemctl status MySQL d.service. So as you can see, the service name is MySQL d.service and the description for this service is it is for MySQL server. So there are actually two locations for each service under systemd. It says that loaded. This is the file that was loaded for the service under user lib systemd system MySQL d.service. And it says that this service is set to enabled. What this means that if this system get rebooted, this service will be automatically started. And the status for this service is active. It is in a running state since up till this date, or you can read in a human format since 2 days. So this service has been running for the last 2 days. This service has a documentation and that is the manual page for MySQLd, the daemon process, and the version of MySQL is 8. If you want to go directly to the documentation page, you simply copy this, right click, open URL, and it will take you to the documentation page. This service, the main PID, the main server process is running under main PID 3218. The status of the server is operational, and the control group, we will talk in maybe another lesson, another course itself, that the control groups control how much CPU, how much memory this MySQL d.service should use. So it indicates this is the one, it has the system.slice for this service. And then these are the couple of lines from the MySQL log file, the starting MySQL, started MySQL. So this is an overview of the systemd that is controlling the MySQL service. We will, in the upcoming lesson, we can actually show you there are two locations. One we already seen, user lib systemd system, but there is another location /etc/systemd/system. So we should not modify any Linux file under this path. We can manually actually modify /etc/systemd/system, but the preferred way to modify or make any changes to this MySQLd service file through systemctl edit MySQLd.service. So sudo systemctl edit MySQLd.service. we have a separate lesson where we will actually modify, we will add some parameters here. But for now, this should be enough for us since we are only exploring the MySQL in this lesson. So I will see you very soon. Welcome back. There are some basic MySQL shell commands that are available to us that can be very useful for our day-to-day DBA activities. These are basic, but like I said, quite useful. So let's explore them. All these shell commands, they run within MySQL shell. So we need to log in to the MySQL before we run these commands. The very first command I want you to keep handy is help command. \h or \question mark are also the short version of the same command. We can use either of these. It prints help about MySQL shell, and it also lists all the available shell commands. Quit or \q for short, it exit out from the MySQL shell. The next one is very handy, the status command. \s is the short. If you want to quickly check the status of MySQL server, under which user the current user is logged in, what is the connection ID, what is the full version of MySQL that is installed, is the current user logged in locally or remotely? I will have a separate lesson on what is the difference between a local connection and a remote connection. What if you are logged in to MySQL and you need to run few operating system commands, like you want to check the memory, the disk usage? System command exactly lets you do that. You will not leave the MySQL shell prompt while you can run any kind of operating system commands. The next one is a use command, probably used more than any other command. It lets you use another database. It takes database as an argument and then switch to that database, so you can run any SQL statement targeted to that specific database. Source command, this is used to execute SQL statement file. All SQL files should have extension .sql. It takes SQL file as an argument. Prompt command is very useful. You can actually set the MySQL prompt in order to accidentally delete any wrong data from a wrong server. I will have a demo of this. This will be very useful to avoid any kind of accidental data. And the last one is edit command. If you are typing any SQL statement and if you have made some mistake and if you want to quickly fix that, so you use the edit SQL command, and that will let you change the SQL command so then you can run it. So let's see all these in action in a demo. Welcome back. So let me log in to the MySQL. Okay. So let me first type help. And as you can see, it lists out all the MySQL shell commands. So the very first one, let me do status. And as you can see, it tells you exactly what is the MySQL version I'm using, what is my connection ID. If I am logged in locally or remotely, it says right now localhost via Unix socket. Whenever you see this Unix socket, it means you are logged in locally. If it says TCP/IP, that is you are logged in from remote. Coming up lesson is also about MySQL socket file that handles this connection. And right here, it even tells you the location of the socket file. For how long this server has been up, this MySQL server, 4 days and 2 hours. What are the number of slow queries? Another thing is that how many queries per second this server has been processing. Let me clear this screen, type help again. Let me do system df-h. See, I'm using a system command within MySQL to execute any kind of operating system command. Let me do system free -m. Let me do system bit of MySQL d. Perfect. So let me clear the screen again, and let me do quickly. Actually, for the source, let me create a file, a SQL statement file. So let me do system vi, let's say server.sql, and I have this file. Let's say, yeah, that should be fine. And now let's do source server.sql. Here you go. So within SQL prompt, I am actually executing a SQL statement file. So let me run another command. Let's say I say host name, and instead of 2, I'll just type it server ID, so it will have a mistake, right? So let me do now edit command, and I can say host name right there. I should type comma, and instead of 1 @ I should have 2, and then at the end let me do colon, quit and save. And if you type this unknown variable host name, okay, do it again, host name, perfect, quit, colon, here you go. And then finally \q or exit to exit out. All right, I'll see you in the next lesson. Welcome back. Let me introduce you to a very important MySQL file that is created when MySQL server startup, mysql.sock file. It is MySQL special file that manages the connections to MySQL server. If user is on the database host and want to connect to MySQL locally, then this file is absolutely necessary. Without this file, users cannot connect. It is owned by MySQL user, and the default location is var lib MySQL, and we also call this data dir. Like I said earlier, for the local connections, this Unix socket file is used, and for the remote connections, MySQL manages them via TCP/IP methods. This special file is empty by default, but MySQL server create another file called mysql.sock.log, and it put the PID of MySQL daemon, the MySQL server daemon, in it. Both of these files then become prerequisite for the clients and the users to connect to the MySQL server locally. So let's see this in action. Welcome back. So I am on the system. Let me first show you the location of MySQL socket files. As you can see, these two are the files. MySQL.sock, it is empty, like I said, and it is a special file. And then .log file, it has about 6 bytes. For now, forget about these two sock and sock.log files. These are MySQL x.log. We will talk about them later on. So first, let me show you PID of MySQL D. And if we say cat var lib MySQL, mysql.sock.log, as you can see, in this log file, MySQL has put this PID of MySQL server daemon. Now let me try to delete these two files and see if we are able to connect to MySQL server. So sudo rm-f, control C, control V, this one, and .sock. We remove those files and let me try to connect it. Clear the screen. MySQL -u root -p, password. Error 2002, cannot connect to local MySQL server through socket varly MySQL mysql.sock, because this file doesn't exist. So in order to have this file back, we need to restart MySQL server. So let me do sudo system, even though I just want to show you one thing, even though systemctl status MySQL D service is still running, but we are not able to connect to it, which means that the file that is responsible for the connections, the incoming connections, that file doesn't exist. But this file is only created when MySQL is started. So what we need to do is we need to restart the service so this MySQL server can recreate these files. Restart. And for this, I need sudo privileges. Once this file is connected, once this file is created, let me try to connect back. Then I'm able to connect. So that's end for this demo. I'll see you in the next one. Welcome back. So in this lesson, we will talk about MySQL global variables. MySQL server maintains many system variables that are used to configure how MySQL should operate. These system variables have two scopes. One is global scope, another is session scope. In this lesson, we will talk about global scope, and in the upcoming lesson, we will talk about session scope. So global variables affect the overall operation of MySQL server, and each global variable has a default value. MySQL server set and initialize each global variable when it starts, but later on, if we would like, we can override this default value either in two ways. One is through option file, another is through command line. All these global variables are identified by a 2@ sign. And there are two ways we can see the values of these global variables. One is show global and the global variable name, and other is select, and then we prefix 2@ signs and the variable name. Examples of some of the global system variables are max_connections, server ID, SQL_mode. So let me show you in a demo how we can retrieve all these, how we can set these values. I'll see you in the next lesson. Welcome back. So let me log into MySQL and then we will retrieve all the system variables. Okay, so the command is show global variables. Oh, this is a long list. So these are all by default system variables that come along with the MySQL server. And in this release of MySQL 8.0, there are about 697. So instead of scrolling all those and trying to find the specific, the one we are looking, so let me try to find a specific global variable, and that is used with the show global variables like max, let's say connections. And for example, if I do not know exactly the variable is pronounced like max underscore connections, so I can also do the similar thing. Let's say I only know up till this, and I put the percent sign, this sign, that's a wild character. Anything after connection should show and exactly the same thing. So as we can see that the max connection global variables has a value of 151. What this means is that there are 150 maximum concurrent connections this MySQL server can accept. So let me try to change this value so we can have a different value, and let me say set global, and then the global variable name is equal to new value. Let me try 300. So now if I will look the value, now I have configured the global variable, the scope is global, which means this variable will be set to 300 as long as this MySQL server is running. So if I restart MySQL server, since I have actually set the value on the command line, this will go away. But if I want to make it a permanent, then we will use the option file, and that is coming into the one of the upcoming lessons. So for example, let me show you. I have exit out of MySQL. My session ends. Let me try to log back in. I log back in. Let me do show global variables, and its value is 300. In the upcoming lesson, when we set the session level scope, as right after when we disconnect, the value is disappears. So let me stop here, and then in the next lesson, we will talk about the session scope. I'll see you in the next lesson. Welcome back. In the previous lesson, we discussed about global scope variables. In this session, we are going to talk about session variables. As we discussed earlier, MySQL maintains many system variables. Some of those variables are global variables, some of them are session variables. In the previous lesson, we gone through some exercise how we can change global variable. In this lesson, I am going to show you how we can change a session variable. And like we previously discussed that the global variables affect the whole SQL Server operation. But session variables only affect the current session that I'm logged in. Right after I quit my session, the session variable's value goes back to what it was before. We can only change session variable default value on the command line. Like global variables, session variables also identified by 2 signs. Similar to global variables, show session variables like variable name, exactly the same like we did. Show global variables like variable name, or simply we can simply say select and the variable name. Either it is global or session. The examples of a session system variables are SQL_mode. The SQL mode is that how the SQL statements will be behaved when they will go through the database engine. So in the upcoming demo, I will show you how we can change this session variable value and how it will affect the MySQL server. So let's see you in the next lesson. Welcome back. So let's have a quick demo on a session variables. I have already logged into MySQL, and to see all the session variables, I can simply say show variables, or I can say show session variables, or simply I can say show session variables like SQL mode. As you can see that the SQL mode is set to all these values. Let's try to change the value of this session variable. I copy this. I will say set session variable name is equal to whatever value I want to have this. Let me clear the screen. Now let's see that show session variables like SQL mode, and the new value has been intact. So of course, this value will only persist as long as I am logged into this current session. So let me try to disconnect from my session. I'm out. Let me log back in. I log back in. Let me try to see the value of this session variable. Since this is a new session, the value went back to whatever it was before. So this was a quick demo on how we change the value of session variables and how these values go back in case of session, and how these values persist as long as we have not restarted this MySQL server. So this ends this demo, and I will see you in the next lesson. Welcome back. I want to show you this page directly from the documentation. This, I have already included this link into the resource section of this lesson. This is called InnoDB Startup Option and System Variables. So actually, this is not only the system variables, both global and session level, but it also gives you all the startup options for the default storage engine for MySQL. This knowledge is very, very important, and it will come in handy whenever you need to set up any global variable, any option related to MySQL server. So I want you to pay attention to this table. The very first one is the name of the variable. is this possible that we provide this option, this name, this parameter while we are starting MySQL server? Yes. Is this variable, if I am not putting in the command line, can I put this variable or parameter in the option file? Yes. Is this a system variable or it is a session level status variable? It is a system variable. Is this the scope for this variable is a global or session level? And also, is this variable parameter is dynamic or not? Any variable, any system variable that is of type dynamic, we can change its value while MySQL server is running. If it says no, it is not dynamic, we cannot change its value while MySQL is running. We have to stop MySQL and then we change the value to have this in effect. So please go through these variables. In the upcoming lessons, we will have to change a lot of these values. So you need to understand that. For example, if I tell you, please show me what is the InnoDB buffer pool size. You can click there. You will tell you if you want to provide this in the command line format, this is the command to use. The pound sign mean it will take one of the values, the minimum, the default value, the minimum value, and the maximum value for 32-bit or 62-bit. And you want to put this here a number or what? The unit of measurement for this global is bytes. So this is actually give you a one picture of everything about these system variables. So I want you to please keep this page in handy whenever you want to set any system variable. Come here, see what are the values I can put in right here. The valid values are only among of these, one of these. If you put any other value, maybe your server will not start. So always refer to this page whenever you want to do and make sure it is global or session level. Is it dynamic or not? And what are the default values and what is the default value and what are the valid values? So I will stop here. I'll see you in the next lesson. Welcome back. Let's learn about MySQL show command. It is a special query in MySQL to view the information schema of any records that are stored in the database. This is a read-only SQL statement, so you can run as many show commands as you want without any problem, without any fear, because this is not going to make any changes in the database. It has many use cases, like it can be used to display all the connected sessions, the connections to the database. It can list all the databases in the database system. It can list all the tables in that database. It can list all the database jobs that are scheduled to run. It can show how a particular table, a user, a database, a trigger, an event was created, and so on. So let me stop here talking and show you some useful show commands in the demo session. Welcome back. I have connected to MySQL server. Let's see how many databases are there in this server. So show databases command. This command shows all the databases that has been created in this database system. So let's see now who is connected to MySQL server. So again, show command, show process list. As you can see that there are only 2 rows appeared. It means only 2 users are connected right now. One of them is my own session root. Another one is event scheduler. I will talk about event scheduler more in one of the upcoming lessons. Right now you only need to know that if there are any scheduled jobs in the database system, this event scheduler user is responsible to run those jobs in the queue. But right now it says that the state is waiting on an empty queue. So let's see if there are any jobs to be scheduled, and that event command is show events. So there are no events, no jobs that are scheduled. So let's see tables in the database. So I'll say show tables. So right now I can see these are all tables in the information schema database, in this schema database. I want to see all the tables either from MySQL or sys. So I can either say use sys. So that will use this database, and I will say show tables, and it will show all the tables in this database right there. Or I can simply say without saying the use database, I can say show tables from, let's say, from MySQL database. So these are all the tables from MySQL, but I am still actually using the sys database. So this completes the demo on the show command. I will see you in the next lesson. Welcome back. So whenever we install MySQL server, it comes with some default system databases, and these system databases are information schema, MySQL, performance schema, sys schema, and the test database. This test database generally deleted by running a MySQL secure installation. Information schema, each MySQL instance will have an information schema database. This information schema also called system catalog or data dictionary because it provides access to the metadata, and the metadata is actually data about data. The tables in this database are read-only. So they are actually views based on the base tables. So we cannot perform any insert, update, delete operations. MySQL schema, it contains tables that store information required by MySQL server itself. It has a grant information to the user accounts. It has a registry of the event scheduler. It has the information on how many plugins are installed in the system. It has a replication system tables.